The Forgotten Farewell tells the emotional story of Emily Carter, a woman in her late 20s still grieving the sudden loss of her beloved grandmother, Margaret. While sorting through the cluttered attic of her grandmother's old Victorian home, a place filled with childhood memories and the lingering scent of lavender, Emily's hands brush against a yellowed envelope tucked inside a weathered cedar chest. Her breath catches when she recognizes her own name scrawled in her grandmother's elegant handwriting, the date stamp revealing it was written just one day before Margaret's unexpected passing. With trembling fingers, she breaks the brittle seal, unleashing a flood of emotions as she absorbs her grandmother's heartfelt words. Margaret confesses she had known about her terminal illness for months, but chose silence over a prolonged farewell, wanting Emily to remember her as the vibrant woman who baked apple pies and told fantastical bedtime stories rather than as a fading patient. The letter overflows with tender advice, bittersweet regrets about family rifts left unmended, and a startling revelation about a long-buried family secret, the Carter legacy, a priceless heirloom hidden somewhere within the very walls surrounding Emily. Following cryptic clues woven into childhood memories, a half-remembered lullaby, references to their secret tea parties in the attic, Emily discovers a loose floorboard beneath the antique rocking horse she played with as a girl. Her pulse races as her fingers close around a small rosewood box containing a tarnished silver key and a faded photograph of a young Margaret standing beside an intricately carved chest Emily has never seen before. Just as she begins searching, the house, a knock at the door, interrupts her. A lawyer delivers a second, even more shocking letter from Margaret. This one reveals that Emily's father, who vanished after a bitter argument a decade ago, might still be alive. Margaret had been secretly sending him money for years, clinging to hope he would return. The final clue lies in a coastal town 200 miles away. Torn between pursuing the mysterious chest, whose contents could change her life, and chasing the faint possibility of reuniting with the father she thought was lost forever, Emily makes a life-altering decision. She follows the trail to the house's dusty basement, where behind a crumbling portrait of her great-grandmother, she finds the legendary chest. Inside, a trove of wartime letters, heirloom jewels, and a stack of envelopes addressed in her father's handwriting. With tears blurring her vision, she clutches the most recent postmark, 6 months old, from a seaside village. The story ends with Emily speeding down a rain-slicked highway, the chest's treasures beside her, but her heart fixed on something far more precious, the chance to reclaim not just her family's lost fortune, but the shattered fragments of her past. The Lost Love Letter. Chapter 1. The letter arrives. The afternoon sun slanted through Claire Bennett's kitchen windows as she sorted through her mail. Bills, a magazine, a postcard from her sister, and then her fingers froze on a plain white envelope. The handwriting made her breath catch. She'd recognize those uneven loops anywhere, even after 5 years. Daniel's handwriting. The postmark showed it had been mailed 3 weeks ago, just 2 days before the accident that took his life. Claire's hands trembled as she carried the envelope to her couch, staring at it as if it might disappear. Part of her wanted to throw it away unopened. The other part needed to know what his last words to her said. With careful fingers, she slid open the envelope. A single sheet of paper, slightly yellowed at the edges. The date at the top made her stomach drop. He'd written this the week after their breakup. Claire, if you're reading this, it means I never got the chance to say this to you in person. Chapter 2. The Truth Revealed. The words blurred as Claire's vision filled with tears. Daniel's letter explained everything: the sudden distance, the cruel breakup, his refusal to even look at her that last day. The doctors gave me 18 months, he wrote. Maybe 2 years if I was lucky. I couldn't let you watch me waste away. You deserved so much more than that. Claire let out a choked sob. All these years she'd thought he'd stopped loving her, that she hadn't been enough. The truth was so much worse. She read about the nights he'd sat outside her apartment in his car, watching her lights, about how he'd nearly called 100 times, about the engagement ring he'd bought months before the diagnosis, still hidden in his dresser drawer. The letter ended with a simple plea. I just wanted you to know it was never you. It was always me being selfish, right to the end. Forgive me. Chapter 3. The Decision. For 3 days, Claire carried the letter with her everywhere. She'd unfold it at stoplights, trace the tear stains on the paper, read his words until she had them memorized. Then she found herself driving past the old Victorian where Daniel's parents still lived. She parked down the block, watching the warm glow from their windows. Did they know? Had Daniel told them why he'd really ended things? Her phone buzzed with a text from her current boyfriend, Mark. Dinner at 7? The normalcy of it felt jarring. Claire realized she had a choice. She could walk up those familiar steps, share Daniel's letter with his grieving parents, reopen all those old wounds. Or she could tuck this last piece of him away, let his final act of protection stand. As rain began to patter against her windshield, Claire reached for the ignition. The letter would stay with her, but some ghosts were better left undisturbed. She turned the car toward home, one hand resting on the passenger seat where the envelope lay, its secrets finally known, but not shared. The past would remain where it belonged, in the past. This time, she'd let it stay there. Chapter 4. The Box in the Attic. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, Daniel's letter trembling in her hands. The morning light caught the dust motes swirling around her like forgotten memories. Noah's voice carried from upstairs. Her 18-year-old was packing for college, his footsteps heavy with excitement she couldn't quite share. A thump from the attic startled her. "Just looking for my baseball glove," Noah called down. She heard another crash, then silence, then, "Mom, you need to see this." The dusty olive-green box in Noah's hands made her knees buckle. She knew that box. She'd watched Daniel pack it before his last deployment, his just-in-case box. The military seal was still intact. Chapter 5. The Second Letter. Noah's fingers left smudges on the dusty lid as they pried it open together. Beneath Daniel's dog tags and a pressed desert flower lay another envelope. Unlike the first, this one was addressed to Noah in his father's precise block letters. Sarah's breath caught at the date, written 2 days after the letter she'd received. The day before the ambush. Noah retreated to his room with the envelope. She heard his door click shut, then nothing for 3 hours. When he emerged, his red-rimmed eyes held something new. A quiet understanding. He knew, Noah whispered. He knew he wasn't coming back. Chapter 6. The Promise. The night before graduation, Sarah found Noah sitting at the piano, plinking out the melody to American Soldier, the song Daniel used to hum. The second letter lay open on the music stand. He wanted me to play this. At graduation, Noah said. His finger tapped a line in the letter. If I can't be there to hear you graduate, make sure they hear this song, loud, like an artillery round. Sarah traced the smudged ink where a tear had fallen. Daniel had included sheet music, a simplified version he'd written himself, knowing Noah might never take lessons. Chapter 7. The Stage. The graduation amphitheater buzzed with chatter as Sarah adjusted Noah's tie. His hands clutched both letters and the sheet music. I can't do this, he muttered. She pressed her forehead to his, just as Daniel used to. He'll hear you, she said, wherever he is. When Noah's name was called, he didn't immediately approach. The dean. Instead, he walked to the grand piano at stage left. The murmurs died as he placed the yellowed sheet music on the stand. The first notes of American Soldier rang out shaky but clear. Halfway through, Noah's voice joined in, rough, but unwavering. In the front row, Sarah silently unfolded Daniel's letter. Chapter 8. The Reading. As the last chord faded, the audience erupted, but Noah raised his hand. The silence that followed was heavier than applause. "My mother has something to say," he said, his voice carrying. Sarah ascended the steps, the letter trembling in her hands. She didn't need to look at the words anymore. She knew them by heart. "My brave Sarah," she began, and the microphone caught her sob. "If you're reading this, I broke my promise. But here's a new one. Our son will know what love looks like, even if it's just your face when you talk about me." A collective inhale swept through the crowd as she continued Daniel's words. His hopes for first steps and first dates, his apology for missing burnt dinners and science fairs. When she reached the end, "Tell Noah to look at the stars tonight. I'll be the one winking back." Noah was already looking skyward. Chapter 9. The Letting Go. That night, they lay on the backyard trampoline, just as they had when Noah was small. The Milky Way sprawled above them. Noah pointed suddenly. "There!" A meteor streaked across the sky. Sarah exhaled 8 years of held breath. In her pocket, the letters crinkled. She didn't need them anymore. Daniel was in the song Noah would play at his wedding, in the way their son threw a fastball, in every star that winked overhead. As Noah's laughter filled the dark, Sarah finally understood. Some promises aren't broken. They're just kept in ways we don't expect. Chapter 10. The Unopened Letter. The funeral was over, the casket lowered, and the wake had come and gone. But for Emma, the grief was still fresh, raw, and suffocating. She sat alone in her apartment, surrounded by the silence that had once been filled with Mia's laughter. It was while cleaning out her desk, a futile attempt at distracting herself, that she found it. A cream-colored envelope, tucked beneath a stack of old receipts, with her name written in Mia's unmistakable handwriting. "To Emma, if I'm ever gone." Her breath caught. When had Mia even put this here? Chapter 11. The Weight of Words. Emma turned the envelope over in her hands, her pulse loud in her ears. Mia had always been dramatic, prone to leaving cryptic notes and making her swear, to open them only under specific, often ridiculous, circumstances. But this felt different. With trembling fingers, she broke the seal. "Hey, Em!" The letter began, and just like that, Mia's voice was in her head again, bright and teasing. "If you're reading this, I guess I finally managed to shut up, huh?" Emma choked out a laugh, tears already blurring her vision. Then came the confession. "I need you to know something. I've been in love with you since college, not like a friend, like the kind that keeps you up at night." The words hit her like a physical blow. Chapter 12. The Memories Flood In. Suddenly, 100 moments made sense. Mia's insistence on being her +1 to every wedding. The way she'd always steered her away from guys who weren't good. Enough. That night, drunk and laughing, when Mia had almost kissed her, then pulled away with a joke, Emma had never noticed. Or maybe she had, and she'd been too afraid to acknowledge it. The letter continued. "I never said anything because I couldn't risk losing you. But if I'm gone, well, I guess I'm selfish enough to want you to know." At the bottom, a postscript. "P.S. Don't you dare feel guilty. Just remember me sometimes, okay?" Chapter 13. The Dilemma. Emma sat frozen, the letter crumpled in her grip. Mia's family had been at the funeral. Her parents, her brother, her cousins. They'd hugged Emma tight, called her Mia's other half. Did they know? Would they want to? The thought of telling them felt like a betrayal. Mia had kept this secret for a reason. But keeping it felt like a betrayal too. Like she was erasing a part of Mia that had been real and true and aching. she thought about Mia's mother, who had sobbed into Emma's shoulder. "You knew her best," she'd said. "You were her heart." Had she? Had she really? Chapter 14. The Revelation. Emma didn't realize she'd made a decision until she was standing on the Thompsons' porch, the letter in her pocket. Mia's mother answered, her eyes red-rimmed but warm. "Emma, honey, come." In. The house smelled like grief and lavender, just like it always had. Mia's childhood photos lined the walls, Mia grinning on a swing set, Mia in a graduation cap, Mia with her arms slung around Emma's shoulders. "I found something," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. "From Mia." She pulled out the letter. Chapter 15. The Truth. Mia's mother read the letter in silence. When she looked up, her eyes were wet but soft. "Oh, sweetheart," she murmured. "We knew." Emma's breath left her in a rush. "What?" "Not in so many words, but a mother knows." She touched the letter gently. "She loved you so much." Emma dissolved into tears, for Mia, for the years lost, for the love that had been. Right in front of her, Mia's mother pulled her close. "You were her heart," she repeated, "and she was yours, even if you didn't know it." Chapter 16. The Letting Go. That night, Emma sat on her balcony, the stars overhead as bright as Mia's laughter. She held the letter in her lap, the paper worn from rereading. She'd spent so long wondering what to do with the truth, but the truth had already been set free. Somewhere, she imagined Mia grinning, rolling her eyes. "Took you long enough." Emma smiled through her tears. "Yeah," she whispered. "Yeah, it did." She folded the letter carefully, pressed it to her chest, and finally, let herself grieve. The Mother's Hidden Apology. Chapter 17. The Inheritance. The lawyer's office smelled like dust and regret. Lena sat stiffly in the leather chair, her fingers drumming against the armrest as the attorney droned on about wills and executors. She hadn't seen her mother in 3 years, not since their last screaming match, when Lena had thrown her car keys on the table and said, "You'll never change." Now her mother was gone. A heart attack, they said. Quick, painless. Lena was handed a small box of personal effects and the keys to her childhood home. Chapter 18. The House of Ghosts. The front door creaked the same way it had when Lena used to sneak in past curfew. The house was frozen in time, her mother's half-finished crossword on the coffee table, the same faded floral curtains, the lingering scent of jasmine perfume. Lena's throat tightened as she climbed the stairs to her old bedroom, now a shrine to a daughter who'd left. Her graduation photo still sat on the dresser. Her mother had kept it dusted. Lena turned away and began packing up the closet. Chapter 19. The Hidden Box. Beneath a stack of sweaters, Lena found a small wooden box she didn't recognize. The latch was stiff, but it gave way with a click. Inside, nestled beside a dried corsage from Lena's junior prom, was an envelope. Her name was written in her mother's careful script. The paper was yellowed at the edges, the ink slightly blurred. In places, water damage, she realized. No. Tear stains. Chapter 20. The Letter. "My dearest Lena," it began. Her mother's voice flooded her mind, clear as if she were standing beside her. "If you're reading this, it means I never found the courage to give this to you. I've written it 100 times, but I could never make the words right." Lena's hands shook as she read on. Her mother confessed everything. the crushing weight of depression after Lena's father left, the paralyzing fear that she was failing as a mother the nights she'd cried herself to sleep after their fights. I was so angry, not at you, but at myself. I didn't know how to fix us. I still don't. The tear stains were heaviest here. Chapter 21. The Truth Unfolds. Lena sank onto the bed, the letter crumpling in her grip. Memories flashed, her mother's sharp words, the way she'd flinch when Lena yelled back, the silent treatments that lasted for days. She'd always assumed her mother was cold, cruel, but the letter painted a different woman, one who was drowning. A postscript caught her eye. I keep your graduation photo on my dresser. It's the last time I remember you looking at me with pride instead of disappointment. I look at it every morning and wish I'd been better. Lena's breath hitched. Chapter 22. The Choice. She could burn the letter, pretend she'd never seen it, walk away and let the past stay buried, or she reached for her phone and dialed her aunt's number. "Did you know?" Lena asked, her voice raw, a pause, then softly. "About the letter?" "No. But about her depression?" "Yes. She hid it from everyone, but especially from you." Chapter 23. The Apology. Lena sat on the porch swing where she and her mother used to drink lemonade in silence. She read the letter aloud, her voice breaking over the words her mother had never been able to say. The wind rustled the trees, carrying her words away, maybe to wherever her mother was now. When she finished, Lena pressed the tear-stained paper to her chest and whispered, "I'm sorry, too." The Time Capsule Letter. Chapter 24. The Dig. The backyard of her childhood home hadn't changed much in 20 years. Claire knelt in the dirt, her fingers brushing against the rusted metal lid of the time capsule she'd buried with her father when she was 10, the summer before he died. "We'll open it when you're all grown up," he'd said, ruffling her hair. She'd forgotten about it until the foreclosure notice arrived, until she found herself back in this empty house, packing up a life she'd tried so hard to leave behind. The shovel clanged against metal. Chapter 25. The Contents. Inside the watertight container, a faded friendship bracelet, a cassette tape, labeled Claire's 10th birthday, her childhood teddy bear, Mr. Wrinkles, and 2 envelopes, one read, "To Future Claire," in her own bubbly handwriting, the other in her father's precise script, "For when you need it most." Her breath caught. She hadn't seen his handwriting in decades. Chapter 26. Young Claire's Letter. She opened hers first. "Dear grown-up Claire," it began. "I hope you're a famous artist and married to Justin Timberlake." She choked out a laugh. The letter continued with predictions about pet dinosaurs and a mansion made of candy. Typical 10-year-old dreams. But at the bottom, one line stood out. "P.S. I hope you and Daddy are still best friends." The paper crumpled in her grip. Chapter 27. Her father's words. His envelope was thicker. Inside, 3 pages. "My dearest Claire," it began. "If you're reading this, something's gone wrong." Her pulse spiked. He wrote about the cancer diagnosis he'd hidden, about how he'd known he wouldn't be there to guide her. Then came the predictions, uncannily accurate. "You'll push people away when you're scared. You'll choose work over love. You'll think you have to do everything alone." Each line was a punch to the gut. Chapter 28. The Warning. The 3rd page contained his advice, and the irony nearly broke her. "Don't make my mistakes, Claire Bear. I spent so much time preparing for a future I wouldn't have that I forgot to live in the present. Don't wait until it's too late to say, 'I love you.' Don't, the list continued. Every single thing she'd done. She thought of the fiancé she'd left, the friends she'd ghosted, the years spent building a career that now meant nothing. Tears splattered the page. Chapter 29. The phone call. The phone rang before she could. Spiral further. Her agent. Again. Claire, the gallery needs an answer. Are you taking the Berlin exhibit or not? A month ago, the answer would have been automatic. Another escape. Another fresh start. But now... She looked at her father's letter. At the line circled heavily. The world will always be there. The people you love won't. I need to think about it, she said, and hung up. Chapter 30. The Reply. Back inside, Claire spread the letters on the kitchen table, her childhood optimism beside her father's hard-won wisdom. She reached for a pen and a fresh sheet of paper. Dear Dad, she wrote, you were right about everything, but it's not too late. Then she dialed another number, one she hadn't called in years. When Michael answered, his voice cautious, she took a shaky breath. I found something you should see, she said. Can you come over? Outside, the sunset painted the sky in hues her father would have loved. The letter that wasn't meant for her. Chapter 24. The Wrong Mailbox. The envelope looked ordinary, cream-colored, slightly wrinkled at the edges, her sister's name printed in neat cursive. Eleanor Hart. Lena froze in her doorway, the rest of the mail slipping from her hands. Eleanor had been dead for 6 months. The return address was unfamiliar, a P.O. box in a town 3 hours away. No name, just initials. J.M. Lena's fingers trembled as she turned the envelope over. The flap wasn't fully sealed, as if someone had opened it and then tucked it back inside. She shouldn't read it, but she did. Chapter 25. The Secret Life. The letter was dated 2 weeks before Eleanor's accident. Ellie. It began, a nickname no one but Lena had ever used. I know you said not to write, but I had to. She looks like you. Same stubborn frown when... She's concentrating. She asks about you every day. When are you coming back? Lena's breath left her in a rush. A child? Her sister, the one who'd sworn she never wanted kids, who'd laughed when their mother brought up grandchildren, had a daughter? The rest of the letter spilled out in fragments. You promised you'd tell Lena. She deserves to know. And so does Sophie. Sophie. A name. Lena's knees buckled. Chapter 26. The Search Begins. The P.O. box led to a small coastal town. Lena drove there in a daze, the letter burning a hole in her purse. The post office clerk recognized the box number immediately. Oh, that's James's, she said. James Mercer, runs the bookstore on Harbor Street. The bell above the door chimed when Lena entered. A man in his late 30s glanced up from stacking books, tousled brown hair, wire-rimmed glasses, a faded Nirvana t-shirt. Then he saw her. His face paled. Ellie? He whispered. Lena's throat closed. You knew my sister. Chapter 27. The Truth Unfolds. Over bitter coffee, James told her everything. Eleanor had met him 5 years ago during a solo trip. They'd fallen fast, recklessly. She'd visit for weeks at a time, telling Lena she was on work retreats. She said she'd tell you about us, James said, running a hand through his hair. About Sophie, but she kept putting it off. Said she didn't know how. Lena stared at the photo he slid across the table, a little girl with Eleanor's wild curls and Lena's sharp chin. Her niece. She's 4, James said quietly. She knows Ellie as Auntie. She doesn't know that her aunt was her mother, that she was gone. Chapter 28. The Decision. Lena sat on the beach, the letter clutched in her hands. She could walk away. Let Sophie grow up thinking her aunt was just a kind stranger. Preserve Eleanor's lie, or she could. Tell her, give her the truth, the photos, the stories. The love Eleanor hadn't known how to give. The waves crashed, relentless. Somewhere behind her, a child's laughter carried on the wind. Lena made her choice. Chapter 29. The Introduction. Sophie, James called. Someone wants to meet you. The little girl looked up from her sandcastle, squinting against the sun. Lena knelt, her voice steady. Hi, Sophie. I'm Lena. I was very close to your Aunt Ellie. Sophie studied her, then grinned. Eleanor's grin, bright and fearless. You look like her, she declared. Lena's heart cracked open. Yeah, she whispered. I do. Chapter 30. The Letting Go. That night, Lena stood on the pier, the letter in one hand, a lighter in the other. The wind tugged at the paper, Eleanor's secrets, her fears, her regrets, all of it, hers to keep or release. The flame caught the edge. As the ashes scattered over the water, Lena whispered the words. She'd never gotten to say, I forgive you. The burned letter. Resurrected. Chapter 24. The Fire. The smell of smoke clung to everything. Clara stood in the ruins of her childhood home, her boots crunching on charred wood and broken glass. The fire had spared little. Her mother's china cabinet reduced to ashes, the family photos melted into grotesque shapes. But then she saw it. Under what remained of her father's desk, a metal lockbox, blackened but intact. Her breath hitched. She hadn't thought of that box in years. Chapter 25. The Fragments. The lock was fused shut, but a crowbar pried it open. Inside, a handful of items survived, a war medal, tarnished but recognizable, a dried rose, brittle to the touch, and a letter half consumed by flames. Clara gingerly lifted the remains of the paper. The edges crumbled at her touch, but the center held, her father's handwriting, frantic and uneven, never meant to leave her there. The hospital in Redwater. Your sister. The words stopped where the fire had Clara's. Hands shook. Sister. She had no sister. Chapter 26. The Search Begins. Redwater was a ghost town 3 hours north. Clara drove through the night, the fragments of the letter spread on her passenger seat. The hospital, if it could be called that, was a crumbling brick building with boarded-up windows. The records room was in the basement. Mildew and rot thickened the air. A single filing cabinet remained, its drawers rusted shut. Clara forced it open. Inside, a folder labeled Hartford, M., her father's name. Chapter 27. The Truth in Ink. The papers inside were brittle with age. A birth certificate. Female, Hartford, June 18, 1985. A hastily scribbled note. Take her. Don't look back. And a name. Mira. Clara's vision blurred. Her parents had brought her home from this hospital in 1985, but this baby, this sister, had been born 2 months earlier, left behind. Chapter 28. The Stranger. The trail led to a diner on the edge of town. Clara had shown the birth certificate to every clerk, bartender, and librarian in Redwater. Finally, an old waitress recognized the name. Mira? Sure, She works the night shift at the truck stop off I-90. Clara's coffee went cold. She drove. The truck stop was a neon oasis in the dark. Inside, a woman with Clara's sharp cheekbones, and their father's green eyes wiped down the counter. Clara's breath caught. "Mira?" The woman froze, looked up. "Who's asking?" Chapter 29. The Confrontation. They sat in a vinyl booth. The hum of the soda machine, the only sound. Mira lit a cigarette. "So, you're the one they kept." Clara flinched. "I didn't know." "Yeah, me neither." Mira exhaled smoke. "Not until last year. Some lawyer tracked me down, said our daddy left me something in his will." Clara's stomach dropped. Their father had died 5 years ago. "What did he leave you?" Mira smirked, bitter. "A letter, an apology, and a key to a safety deposit box." She leaned forward. "You want to know what was in it?" Clara wasn't sure she did. Chapter 30. The Unfinished Confession. The safety deposit box exhaled a breath of stale air when Mira wrenched it open, revealing its secrets like a wound torn fresh. Nestled inside lay a time capsule of their fractured past, a faded Polaroid of 2 newborns curled together like parentheses, their tiny hands already clinging. A deed for 20 acres of redwater soil, purchased with blood money 3 decades. Past, and beneath them, an envelope so crisp it seemed to pulse with unfinished business. Clara's fingers trembled as she unfolded the letter dated 2 weeks after their father's funeral, his ghost reaching from the grave with ink-stained fingers. "My girls," it began, the words crawling up her throat like smoke. "If you're reading this together, then the fire did what I couldn't." The truth unfolded like a switchblade. Their mother's debts to dangerous men, his horrific calculus of saving them by separating them, the decades of watching from shadows. Outside, a car backfired like a gunshot, and Mira's cigarette tumbled. To the floor, embers scattering like the pieces of their shattered childhood. The letter ended mid-sentence. "For God's sake." As if torn away by violent hands, leaving them clutching each other in the vault's fluorescent glare, the taste of gasoline and old lies thick on their tongues. The fire had been no accident, and whoever set it would be back. Chapter 31. The Letter from Beyond. The rain fell in relentless sheets against the kitchen window, each droplet exploding against the glass like tiny liquid stars before dissolving into nothingness. Eleanor sat motionless at the worn oak table, her fingers tracing the edges of the envelope that had arrived that morning. The paper felt unnaturally crisp beneath her fingertips, as though it existed outside of time. The postmark glared up at her. Yesterday's date, impossibly fresh, while the neat, looping handwriting spelling out her name made her stomach clench with recognition. Daniel's hand. Daniel's unmistakable flourish on the R of read. But Daniel had been dead for 14 days. She turned the envelope over, her thumbnail catching on the seal. The paper gave way with a whisper, revealing a single sheet folded into thirds. As she unfolded it, the scent of bergamot and old books, Daniel's scent, rose from the page, so vivid she could almost believe he was standing behind her, his breath warm against her neck. The first line struck her like a physical blow. "My love, if you're reading this, I'm gone." Her vision blurred as she absorbed the familiar cadence of his words, the way he always understated the unbearable. She could hear his voice in every syllable, that quiet, measured tone he used when explaining difficult things. The letter continued, detailing instructions that made her pulse stutter, directions to their cabin, mention of a hidden floorboard, a final gift he'd left for her. But halfway down the page, the ink changed. The letters grew jagged, the spacing uneven, as though the writer's hand had begun to shake, or as though another hand had taken over. "The key is in the music box." The new script insisted, the letters digging into the paper with unnatural pressure. Play it at midnight. He's waiting. Eleanor's breath caught. This wasn't Daniel. This was something else. Something that knew about the antique music box she'd inherited from her grandmother. The one she'd never told Daniel about. The one currently sitting in her darkened bedroom, silent for decades. A gust of wind rattled the window pane, startling her. The letter slipped from her fingers, fluttering to the table like a wounded bird. Outside, the storm intensified, branches scraping against the side of the house like skeletal fingers. Eleanor became acutely aware of the emptiness of the house around her, the way the shadows in the corners seemed thicker than they should be. She reached for the letter again, her fingers brushing against something damp. A reddish-brown smudge stained the corner of the page, rust-colored, flaking when she touched it. Not ink, not anything she wanted to identify. The scent of bergamot had faded, replaced by something darker, earthier, like wet soil, like something freshly unearthed. Chapter 32. The Cabin in the Woods. The drive to Blackwood Lake stretched before her like a tunnel through time. The rain had eased to a mist that clung to the windshield, the wipers pushing aside not water, but memory after memory of drives taken with Daniel. The trees lining the narrow road stood like sentinels, their branches intertwining overhead to form a skeletal canopy that filtered the fading afternoon light into jagged patterns on the asphalt. With each mile, the air in the car grew heavier, until Eleanor found herself rolling down the window, desperate for air that didn't taste of stale grief and unanswered questions. The cabin appeared suddenly around a bend, its familiar silhouette, both comforting and alien. The cedar shingles had darkened with age and moisture, the wraparound porch sagging slightly in the middle like an old man's shoulders. Eleanor killed the engine and sat for a long moment, staring at the front door where Daniel had kissed her goodbye that final morning, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Now the door stood slightly ajar, though she knew she'd locked it after the funeral. A thin trail of mud led across the threshold, as though someone had entered in a hurry. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of pine resin and something else, something metallic that coated her tongue. The living room lay in disarray, not violently disturbed, but subtly wrong. Daniel's favorite armchair had been moved away from the fireplace. The books on the coffee table were stacked in an order he would never have used, and the photograph of them on their wedding day, the one that had sat on the mantel for a decade, now faced the wall. Eleanor's hands trembled as she righted it, her reflection in the glass merging with Daniel's smiling face in the image. She moved through the cabin like a ghost, each step stirring up dust that glittered in the thin shafts of light piercing through the curtains. The bedroom door creaked ominously as she pushed it open, revealing the wrought iron bed frame they'd bought at that flea market in Vermont. Kneeling beside it, her knees pressed into the braided rug Daniel's mother had made, she ran her fingers along the floorboards until she found the one that didn't quite match the others. The wood was smoother here, worn down by years of secret touches. Her nails found purchase in the narrow gap, and with a groan of protest, the board lifted to reveal the darkness beneath. The box was smaller than she'd imagined, no larger than her palm, but its weight felt disproportionate, as though it contained something far denser than its size suggested. The wood was dark and polished, its surface carved with symbols that seemed to shift under her gaze. As she lifted it, a current of air moved through the room despite the closed windows. The temperature dropped suddenly, her breath visible in the suddenly frigid air. From somewhere in the cabin, a floorboard creaked, then another. Then a third, in perfect rhythm, approaching. The box vibrated in her hands, a discordant chime beginning to emanate from within, despite its mechanism remaining untouched. The melody was familiar, a lullaby her grandmother used to hum, one she'd never played for Daniel. As the first notes filled the room, the footsteps in the hallway ceased. The silence that followed was more terrible than any sound, Then, from directly behind her, a voice that wasn't Daniel's whispered, "You're late." Chapter 33. The Box of Unfinished Words. The afternoon light slanted through the dusty attic window, painting golden rectangles across stacks of cardboard boxes that smelled of time and lost memories. Clara knelt on the wooden floorboards, her fingers brushing against the faded labels in her mother's neat handwriting. Christmas decorations, 1998, 2005. Photo albums. Evelyn's school projects. She hadn't planned on sorting through her mother's things so soon after the funeral. It had only been a week. But the silence in the old house had grown too heavy, and she needed something, anything, to keep her hands busy, to keep her mind from circling the same unanswerable questions. The box at the back of the attic was smaller than the others, unlabeled. Inside, she found a collection of journals, their spines cracked with use, and beneath them, a sealed envelope. Her breath caught when she saw the writing. "For when you're ready," her mother's handwriting, but different, shakier, the letters less sure, like it had been written toward the end. Clara turned the envelope over in her hands. There was no stamp, no address, just those 4 words, waiting. She almost didn't open it. Chapter 34. The words left unsaid. The letter was dated 6 months ago. "My dearest Clara." I've started this letter a dozen times and thrown each one away. I tell myself it's because I don't know what to say, but the truth is, I'm afraid. Afraid you won't read it. Afraid you will. Clara's vision blurred. She could hear her mother's voice in the words, that quiet, deliberate way she had, of speaking when something mattered. "I know I wasn't the mother you needed. I know the distance between us is my fault. I thought I was protecting you by letting you go. I thought you'd come back when you were ready." A tear splashed onto the paper. "The doctors say I don't have much time left. I'm not writing this to guilt you. I just needed you to know I've kept your room exactly as you left it. I still set an extra plate for you at Christmas. Every year, I tell myself, maybe this one." Clara's chest ached. The letter ended. Simply, "I love you. I always have, and I'll wait as long as it takes." She hadn't signed it, as if she'd meant to write more, as if she'd run out of time. Chapter 35. The Last Plate. The house exhaled around Clara, its silence thick with the weight of all the words never spoken. She stood frozen in the doorway of her childhood bedroom, her fingers trembling against the doorframe. The room was a museum of abandonment, her faded blue quilt still neatly folded at the foot of the bed, the posters of bands she'd outgrown years ago clinging stubbornly to the walls, the desk where she'd once scribbled teenage poetry now holding only dust and ghosts. A sob caught in her throat as she noticed the book left open on the nightstand, a single dried wildflower pressed between its pages, the same kind she used to pick for her mother during their summer walks. The creak of the floorboards beneath, her feet sounded like accusations as she moved through the house. Downstairs, the dining room table stood as a silent witness to years of futile hope. 2 place settings, one pristine and unused, the other worn from a decade of solitary meals. Clara's fingers traced the rim of the empty plate, her vision blurring as she imagined her mother sitting here year after year, staring at the untouched silverware, listening for a knock at the door that never came. The letter lay unfolded beside, the plate, its edges soft from Clara's restless fingers. She read the words again, each sentence carving deeper into her heart. "I thought you'd come back when you were ready. Every year, I tell myself, maybe this one. I'll wait as long as it takes." A gust of wind rattled the kitchen window, sending a shower of cherry blossom petals fluttering against the glass. Clara remembered how her mother used to call them spring snow, how they'd always made a wish on the first one they caught each year. Without thinking, she reached for the unused plate and carefully set it in the center of the table. Then, moving, as if in a trance, she went to the china cabinet and took out her mother's favorite teacup, the delicate floral one that was only used for special occasions. The kettle whistled its mournful song as Clara prepared 2 cups of Earl Grey, just the way her mother had taught her, a splash of milk, no sugar. Steam curled from the porcelain as she placed 1 cup at her mother's usual seat, the other where she herself would have sat. Outside, the last light of day bled across the hardwood floors, painting everything in hues of amber and regret. Clara lifted her cup with shaking hands. "I'm ready now, Mom," she whispered to the empty chair. The words hung in the air between them, an apology, a benediction, the first step across a bridge built 10 years too late. As the twilight deepened, Clara sat at the table where her mother had waited for so many lonely years, and for the first time in a decade, she allowed herself to remember. Not the arguments, not the distance, but the way her mother's hands had felt, brushing her hair, the sound of her laughter floating through, an open kitchen window, the scent of lavender and flower that had always clung to her sweaters. The memories came like spring rain, washing away the bitterness, leaving something tender and raw in its place. She didn't clear the table that night. When morning came, sunlight glinting off the untouched tea in her mother's cup, Clara reached for her phone and dialed the number she'd avoided for years, her aunt's. "Can you tell me?" she asked, voice thick with tears and something like hope. "Where Mom is buried?" Somewhere beyond the kitchen window, a single cherry blossom petal danced on the breeze, carrying with it all the words that had finally been said, all the love that had never really been lost, just waiting, patiently, for the right moment to bloom again.